Hey guys, welcome back to Personal Injury Perspective. Today we're covering a lawsuit that is international, political, reputational, and extremely messy. French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte Macron are suing American commentator and influencer Candace Owens for defamation. And this one is wild, guys. My viewers have asked me, where does this fall on the justice scale? Let's break it down and find out. Here's what the complaint alleges. Now guys, you can see this complaint online. You can look at it. It's pretty easily findable. If you don't want to sift through 250 pages of the amended complaint, I'm going to save you some time here. Candace Owens made multiple public statements claiming that Brigitte Macron was born a male, that her supposed birth name was Jean Michel, and that the Macron family covered up a gender transition. Is there more? Of course, there's much more. But in general, this is the thrust of the amended complaint. In essence, the Macrons argue that this is all a lie and that Owens is using her platform to make money on it, and this was a shocking revelation that she's making money on. According to the complaint, these weren't posed as questions or opinions by Owens. They were delivered as assertions of fact or factual claims. They were repeated across platforms and broadcast to millions. The Macrons say all of this is false, defamatory, damaging, and malicious. Now, I don't watch Candace Owens and I don't follow her channel, but according to the complaint, there was an 8-part series called Becoming Bridget, which went into her being a male, meaning male to female, and there's a cover-up about it. It's extensive. There's a lot, it seems, because of 8 parts. So I'm going to take my lawyer hat off here for a second, and I'm going to put on my common sense hat. You don't file a lawsuit like this unless you believe, as the plaintiff, that you can prove that these statements were untrue. Because if Macron, the president of France, was wrong, then discovery opens the door for lawyers to dig into birth documents, medical history, and yes, they can attempt to request the physical examination of Brigitte Macron's private parts. Imagine that. A physical examination of the First Lady of France? That's not any road that any world leader voluntarily walks down unless they feel extremely confident about the truth. And he should know the truth. So let's talk about the law. Can Macron sue Owens? That's the first question. Now, here's the part that makes this all fascinating. Just recently, we did a video about the Venezuelan fishermen, they're Venezuelan nationals who might get blown up by drones or claiming they got blown up by drones in international waters, and their families have zero recourse. But here, a foreign head of state can sue a U.S. citizen overseas for reputational harm. Yes, that's perfectly legal. There's no bar to the Macrons suing Owens for damages. And in this context, a foreigner can sue a U.S. citizen. And you might ask, how does that make sense? Well, it makes sense, I guess. Same thing in Florida. Look, in Florida, if a negligent driver kills an 8-month-old fetus in a car accident, it's not considered a life under the Florida Wrongful Death Act, i.e. the fetus is not considered a life. But if you intentionally harm a pregnant woman and the same 8-month-old fetus dies, that's considered murder. So our law is full of paradoxes, and in this case, it's just another perfect example of one of those paradoxes when you compare it to the Venezuelan nationals versus the Macrons. So we have a valid suit against Owens, but let's talk practicality. Even if Macron wins, is Candace Owens collectible? He'd be seeking a lot of money, for sure. Does she have a defamation insurance policy? A personal umbrella policy that includes intentional torts, because defamation is an intentional tort? An international coverage clause? A non-wasting policy that won't burn up on attorney's fees as this case is litigated? If the answer to these questions is no, Macron may win a judgment, but will that mean he gets the money for that judgment? That's the question. And defending this case, it's a financial nightmare. Candace is going to need a high-level international defamation attorney. There's going to be translation of thousands of documents. There's going to be gender experts. There's going to be international depositions, extensive discovery legal battles that require deep legal research and extensive hearings with judges, and a multi-year procedural slog. We're talking about multi-six-figure attorney's fees even before reaching trial. possibly even 7. Most influencers don't have that kind of insurance and they don't have that kind of money to cover this kind of claim. Without it, Candace's own defense costs could swallow her up entirely. She would need literally multi-millions of dollars sitting around to pay a judgment and her attorney's fees and also go through a horrifically expensive road to whatever judgment the Macrones are seeking in the case. As for the law, I'm not going to go too far into that. Suffice it to say, if the Macrones can prove Candace was lying or making these statements recklessly with knowledge or suspicion they were untrue, there is a case here. But here's where it gets tricky. Bridget Macrone is at the pinnacle of her public life. Her reputation is already globally cemented. The question becomes, did these statements actually damage her career, her relationships, her standing, her safety? Or are they simply insulting? And in 2025, claiming someone is trans isn't automatically viewed as defamatory the way it might have been decades ago. Actually, for her to be insulted by such a statement could be viewed by some people in the trans community as insulting. So there's that factor to weigh into all of this. And damages here, they exist, but the plaintiff may not be able to easily quantify those damages in giant numbers. When I say giant numbers, I mean multi-millions of dollars to justify the lawsuit. The complaint talks about merchandising and how Candace has made money on this claim, but she's a right-wing influencer. What part of Candace Owens' income is due to the Macrone situation where she did her 8-part series versus the many other battles she puts her hat into on her channel? That's a real concern for the plaintiff, being able to prove that there's money that Candace Owens made off of the Macrone lies, as the plaintiff would couch them, versus other things that she does. And finally, fees. Who pays for all this? Most PI lawyers, personal injury lawyers like myself, we don't touch defamation. We do this work on a contingency fee, meaning we get paid nothing unless we make a recovery for the client. That's not how it works for lawyers in defamation. I personally refer cases like this to Dave Steinfeld, Esquire. He's an attorney who charges an hourly rate and handles heavy and complex stuff whilst sending a monthly bill to his client to pay for his attorney's fees. I have this right here. Dave Steinfeld has a $1 million verdict on a case where a defendant circulated defamatory and libelous information destroying Bargain Bob's Carpets business. So Dave was able to show a clear connection on the business losses and the lies that were told about Bargain Bob's business. And that's how he got this verdict. But Bargain Bob's paid him a lot of money to get there. And the same question prevailed there as it prevails here. In that case, was Jack Stein, the defendant, was he able to pay an entire $1 million verdict? I mean, I can give you a piece of paper that says, here, you're entitled to $1 million, but unless somebody can pay that $1 million verdict, you don't get paid that $1 million. The court system doesn't give it to you automatically. There's a process involved in that, if you ever can collect it. So let's turn it back to Macrone and Owens. They'll be cutting massive checks over the years for a doozy of a lawsuit. And this is not a small case. Make no mistakes, folks. This is a career-defining, resource-draining, headline-generating war between these two parties. And where does this fall on the personal injury perspective justice scale? I give it a 3 out of 10, and here's why. Macrone likely can prove falsity. Statements seem like they were presented as fact. There appears to be a repeated publication, and if the Macrones can prove the statements are false, it is easy to argue recklessness. But the cons are extensive on this one. Questionable collectability, international complexity, political overtones, extremely expensive litigation, it's sensitive, it's invasive discovery, and years of motion practice, and it's high risk for both sides. A case with legal merit, but enormous practical problems. Lawsuits often sound simple, guys. Hey, someone said something untrue, so you sue them, right? But in this case, this one's not simple at all. It's political, it's personal, it's invasive, it's expensive, and it will take years to litigate. If I had to guess, this case is really not about money though. Macrone doesn't need the money, nor does his wife, Bridget. This is about Macrone proving publicly and definitively that Candace Owens was wrong. And truth, in this case, comes with a very large price tag. This has been Personal Injury Perspective. If you found this breakdown helpful, follow along as we continue to look at whether victims in high-profile cases like this one can truly obtain justice. Be safe out there, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I will see you on the next episode of Personal Injury Perspective.